Welcome back to the best in overnight talk radio. This is Coast to Coast AM, filling in for George Norrie. I'm Dave Schrader, and my guest this evening, Sondra London. Walk us through the MKUltra labs and some of the stories involved in that. I know you don't have a whole lot of time on it, but it is something I think people are going to have an interest in.
Just try to zoom through this now. Of course, we know that Project MKUltra was funded right there in 1953. Stephen was born in 1951. Dianne was born in 1955. And before MKUltra, we also had Project Artichoke and Project Bluebird going back to 1950. So that gives us a little bit of a time frame on the programs that were in play at the time. When Dianne and Stephen were brought into their experience of the program, it was at Fort Devens, and it was 1961 that the two kids were taken into the program. So what they did was go down to a building on base, which they were told was a clinic, but when they got there, there was no signed clinic, and it wasn't the usual clinic they'd gone to before. It looked like a portable. So we went into this building, and then the difference became when they began to go down a spiral flooring into an underground facility, which was the lab. None of the goings-on that went down there went on above. Above, it was just a little wood-frame building where they would go in, and then below was the lab. Well, Dianne herself was into that program for about a year and a half there, at the age of 6 to 7. The purpose of the program, ultimately, of course, is to identify and activate actual assassins, people who will kill on command. And so at some point in the training that they undergo and the testing that they undergo, candidates are sorted out. Into the first place, who are the candidates who are taken into this program? And when Dianne and Stephen were, their father, of course, tried to promote, well, I've got these other kids too, you know. And they're like, no, we know about your children, and these are the only two who are qualified. There were things that had been noticed about Dianne before then. But in the lab, they were treated to sort of paramilitary training with athletic-type exercises. They were taught to control their breathing and their blood pressure. And then in these sessions that Dianne related to me, there were group sessions which were like kind of a group hypnosis type thing, where there were other children present, but most of the important work that Dianne experienced, she would be taken by herself into a room, which would be equipment or some particular setting.
Were they chosen because they would be easy to manipulate because they were already so fragile from what they were seeing and dealing with their father?
I'll bet. Because other children that have been taken into the program that I've interviewed, yes, they were the products of abuse. Some of them were military. Several of them were parents were in atomic energy. One boy, mother was a professor at Columbia, and father was a police captain. So there we get children that were pre-qualified in some way, make it a little bit easier. And, of course, all along the way, people were sorted out. And there comes a chapter in the book called We Did Not Fail, because that's what Dianne was told when they, let her go, that we did not fail. That's not the point. It's just that we reached a certain point in the program with you, and now it's over. But it was very shortly after that the thing was dismantled. And before that happened, with Diane and Stephen being terminated from the program, there were also signs of shakiness there at the lab, within the lab, with the personnel, that there began to be segments that didn't approve of what was being done, and dissension among them. And then there was an actual stand down that was with guns drawn by opposing parties there about, whatever they were doing. So things weren't really going that well, and it was not long after that that this program was dismantled. But
wouldn't you think that they would have killed these two children because they knew too much? There was something going on. You think they would have disappeared them at some point?
No, it wasn't like that. And the work in the lab really didn't seem to have anything to do with their dad. And there was work with remote viewing and work with psychic ability, developing the psychic ability in the remote viewing, and these were the things that Diane was tested on when her powers were demonstrated before the visiting doctors. And they had the big scene where they made her locate things at a remote location and reveal all kinds of information, and she said it was just like the feeling part of her was paralyzed, and only the part that knew what to do was in control. And that scene was quite dramatic, and Stephen actually played a starring role at the end, and so that gets back, and I don't really want to spoil the fun of reading the book. I mean, what happened. But that sets the scene pretty much. They always wanted to qualify sooner or later any candidate on the issue of, would they kill? And the point is that try to put it different ways. And would they kill for their mother? Would they kill for their priest? Would they kill for their country? Would they kill, whatever? But here's what happens with the hypnosis involved is whenever any kind of admission or any kind of possibility might be admitted, then that qualification can be met hypnotically, if you follow me.
Okay, to a degree, yeah.
However,
it's very convoluted in a lot of this, right?
With insurmountable moral structures within their personality or all of their personalities, this could not be surmounted. And that person would then be shunted off into a different program.
Okay. And how did they eventually get away and break through from all of this and get away from this abusive family and father? But from their family.
Father being a jerk.
Okay, but how did they get away from the father who was already threatening to murder them and do horrendous things?
And there's a really strange development toward the end of the book where, as an adult, Diane actually comes back and moves back in the house with her mother who's dying and her father who's no better than he ever was, and brings her daughter. So that's a whole other thing. But how did they survive these mortal encounters? And then there was more than one. He had tried to drown Diane. He did poison her. And it's several really terrible occasions that occurred. And me working with Diane and having a conversation at one point, I'm just, even though I knew how everything went, this is years along, and I just said, how could you even survive? And she boiled it right down, and she said it was the lady. It was divine intervention. Because the lady would appear, and the lady would intervene, and the lady would protect and console. And this is the blessed spiritual presence. And Diane feels that this is the only reason she's alive today.
It's because of an angelic presence that was making itself known to help.
Yes, and I've heard this before about the lady, that she doesn't appear unless it's under duress. and that she's not to be trifled with, and she's not to be made to appear through ruses or empty ceremonies. But when there's a vital suffering, human suffering, and there's a spontaneous spiritual manifestation, and she's not the only one who's experienced this. I'm not Catholic, and this is not a Catholic book, but I cannot deny that this is a part of the story.
Interesting stuff. Thank you very much for being a part of the show. Sondra London, Good Little Soldiers is the name of the book. We'll have links up to her website and ways for you to find more information.
May I just say the website is goodlittlesoldiers.com.
Yep, goodlittlesoldiers.com. Thank you so much for being a part of the show, Sondra.